Ma'am, thank you. Good to see you. Put you right over there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Happy to give you the opportunity to have your positions on issues heard and your candidacy viewed by as many people as possible. And when I called you initially, I thought, well, I'll ask her the standard drill of questions. Why are you doing this? Tell me about how you got involved in politics. Let's talk about the campaign. But then I was watching the debate on Tuesday night between Greg Abbott and Wendy Davis. And
So was I.
As you were. And at the end of the telecast on cable, what pops up but a Kathie Glass ad, in which, among other things, you complained, understandably, it's not said but not as a pejorative, that you were not allowed into the debate. And so I got to thinking, let's give you the opportunity that you were denied on Tuesday night.
Wonderful.
And let's ask you the same questions that Greg Abbott and Wendy Davis were asked in the debate and give you the opportunity to respond. Let's basically have a do-over. How's that sound? So, last night, I faithfully transcribed the questions that that those candidates were asked, and I'm going to give you in rapid-fire succession. We don't have Ross Ramsey is not going to go all red light on us as he did during the lieutenant governor's debate, so I'm not going to cut you off necessarily. But I do want you in relatively short form to give us answers to the questions that they were asked, and let's give people the opportunity to give a kind of compare and contrast. How about that?
I love it.
You like that? Okay, first, if you were governor today, Ms. Glass, what immediate steps would you take to protect the people of Texas from the Ebola virus?
I would ask for our health commissioner what went on there. We don't know what happened.
Do you think he knows what went on there?
I think he should know, and if he doesn't, he should find out and tell the people of Texas. We don't know what happened. We don't trust our federal government to tell us what's happening. It's a sad situation. There have been mistakes all along the way. It never should have come to this.
What mistakes, Ms. Glass, specifically are you referring to? Now I'm doing something different from the debate because I didn't see Gromer following up necessarily, but I'm gonna just play this out. So what mistakes were made?
This person should not have been able to get on that airplane and arrive here.
Well, it sounds like you're mad at the Liberian government, not at our government.
Well, on our end, we can control who steps off that airplane and who goes outside that zone. But at the hospital, they dropped the ball big time. This gentleman was a patient. He went there. I guess he told them all the pertinent information, and they let him go. He probably is really torn up because he exposed these children and other people to this disease, and he wouldn't have if he'd been treated properly. So yes, I'd like to know what happened to put us in this place.
Well, the reporting has indicated that the hospital dropped the ball somewhere along the way. We'll find out whether that's in fact the case, but the reporting has suggested that he had conveyed to some people at the hospital that he had traveled from West Africa.
And he had the symptoms.
And that didn't get around, and he had symptoms, and they sent him home. But let me come back to what you said earlier about he shouldn't have gotten on the plane, or we have the ability to control who gets off the plane. Apparently he was not showing symptoms at the time he was on the plane. What can the government do except just decide that given the threat of the Ebola virus, that we're not going to let anybody from Africa come into this country?
Other countries have made that decision. And I don't know if it's time to make it here, but it certainly should be red flagged.
Now, how do we as citizens take comfort from what we have learned in terms of travel to Dallas or travel through Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C.? And as governor, what power do you really have to do anything?
I think the bully pulpit is a power that's not being used here to convey truthful information. And the truth is, we don't know much about this disease. We don't know how it's transmitted. We don't know if it's mutated. So a high degree of alertness is in order. But we're being told, don't worry, just go about your business, and I don't think that's the right message.
Would you quarantine everybody in that hospital until we had the opportunity to test them to be sure that this...
No, I'm sure we have protocols in place. I'd be shocked if we didn't to cover this, but they weren't followed. No guidelines, no standards are good if you don't follow them.
Okay. Next question. Would you further cut the number of standardized tests offered to our public school students? You know that last session, in one of the rare moments, Republicans and Democrats overwhelmingly voted to reduce the number of standardized tests from 15 to 5. We have candidates across the board now saying that that's not enough and that we ought to reduce them further. In fact, Senator Vanderpute, running for lieutenant governor, wants to take them down to 1. You heard both Senator Davis and General Abbott in the debate on Tuesday night talk about the need to further reduce those tests. You're no big fan of federal mandates. You're no big fan of the requirements that these kinds of tests similar to these kinds of tests. So what would your specific plan be on this?
I would reduce it to one, and I would let the local school system decide what that one is. When I went to school, which was not all that long ago, we took one, the Iowa Basic Skills Test, and it told us, our teachers and the local school districts, everything they needed to know about where we were. We're not testing for the right things. I'm opposed to C-scope, which is what they call Common Core here in Texas, and the testing that it mandates.
Of course, we don't have Common Core in Texas, and that's been a...
C-scope.
Right, well, so you actually believe that C-scope is as pernicious a threat to Texas
I do.
as Common Core
And
is.
that's one thing that wasn't discussed in this debate.
Right.
And I alone in this race think we overspend on education. It's Dan Patrick said in his debate that it was 50% of our budget, $100 billion. We will never spend enough to satisfy the critics, and that includes the judges, federal and state judges, that said we should spend more. And you know why they say we don't spend enough? Because we do poorly on these tests. Isn't that a pernicious
Well, I want to
effect?
come back to the question of public education spending or funding in a second, but stick with the question of standardized tests. So, by what means then, if you don't have these kinds of tests, do you hold schools and school districts and teachers accountable in terms of assessing whether they're doing a good enough job of educating our students?
Well, I think as a parent, if you return to local control, true local control, without this insidious interference that comes from the federal government through the C-scope mechanism, then I think they know. I trust them to know.
Right. Standardized tests, though, are not a federal issue. Standardized tests are a state issue.
And if you have the one test, one should be enough. But the tests that they're being taken now, they're not designed to test for the things that I think you want to see.
What are the things that you want to see?
I want to see if we are abiding by our Texas Constitution, which mandates a system of free and efficient public schools for the express purpose of training our citizens, allowing them, educating them to be able to defend their liberty and their rights. That's right in the Constitution. I want a test that would be designed to say, are you fulfilling that mandate? Because I don't think we are. I think our government schools now are not educating children to love liberty. They're indoctrinating them to accept conformity and collectivism. That's violating our Texas Constitution.
Can you give me a specific example of what our schools are doing kind of to contravene the idea that we have liberty in this country? What exactly in the curriculum?
The history that's being taught and the people that have exposed C-scope and what's being done, the curriculum, they're not being taught things, either Texas history or American history. They're not being taught that our system of government, what it is, how it's different, the American exceptionalism that meant more liberty for us. They're not being taught to understand that, to discuss it, to value it, to be able to want to work for it.
So you share the view of critics of our public school curriculum, some of whom have said at the State Board of Education level that we've allowed our curriculum to get away from us. We need to do a major overhaul of our curriculum to take out negative influences, all that. You're with those people?
Yes, I think so. I think I understand what they're saying and I agree. But this is the mandate, I would say, to fulfill our constitutional mandate. We have to know that these Texas tax dollars, which I understand are about $8,000 per student, that comes from the state of Texas. This is separate from school property tax.
This is the per student spending amount. Yeah, right.
I think it's $8,000. We need some confirmation that that is being spent consistent with our Texas Constitution and not in violation of it.
The candidates on Tuesday night were also asked, how should test scores be used in determining whether students graduate or whether they advance to the next grade level? What's your sense of that?
I would leave it up to the local school. If they've got this system in place, we are confident that they are using our Texas tax dollars.
So no standards from the TEA, no standards from the state to determine social promotion or promotion ahead, I should say, to the next...
Maybe loose, but largely it should be a decision made locally.
Right. And again, you would say the same about the evaluation of teachers, so that if
Yes.
you are regarding test scores as a metric to evaluate the performance of teachers, that too at the local level.
Yes.
And the
As much as
inconsistency,
possible.
the
As much as
inconsistency of the application of those metrics across districts or across parts of the state wouldn't concern you?
No, I'm prepared for different results because people are different, individuals are different. I don't think Texas is too big for a one-size-fits-all solution to anything. But I'm convinced, and this is part of what our Texas government is built on, local control of schools. And they don't have that now.
So when people complain about one-size-fits-all, typically they're talking about the federal government imposing mandates across the 50 states, understanding that Texas is different from California, is different from New York. You're saying that the state shouldn't even impose mandates to make Houston and San Antonio and El Paso and Lubbock aligned. It should basically be, 254 counties, each setting their own standards.
Yeah, and if they have different dropout rates or different graduation rates, well, then they just need to be able to adapt and provide their own solution, because their students are not the same. They're individuals.
Is county level local control adequate, or should we go more local than that? Should it be by city? Should it be by school district? Should it be by household? How local do you want to go?
As local as you can. There are some counties in Texas, I can tell you because I've been to them, that the county is a smaller unit as you would want to get to. But again, I leave that to them.
Should parents be able to decide? I mean, I want to understand, to drill down here, how far you're willing to turf the responsibility to assess performance and develop metrics. Can I be the independent Republic of Evan and decide whether my kids are getting an adequate education without interference from my neighbor?
Well, yes, and you should be able to take your children to another place.
There are some libertarians clapping, obviously.
Where you
I was
are
pandering to them, I think.
satisfied.
Yeah. And I should be able to pull my kid out and put my kid in a place
Yes.
where I think there's a better performance. All right, let me move over to driver's permits for undocumented immigrants. You actually have a guest worker program for Texas plan on your website that refers to the steps that would need to be taken to be permitted to remain here and be a productive contributor to the economy of Texas and to the state. And actually, you reference the possibility of taking a driver's test and getting a driver's permit. So my sense is you may disagree with General Abbott and agree with Senator Davis that there ought to be some identification for undocumented persons who drive.
I agree that we need to know who's driving and that they're licensed. But I would do it at the same time. And I say that we should have this guest worker program, as we've done in times past. And here's some of the parameters I would put in there. And I would say to enroll in our program, you need to have a Texas driver's license, not that you will get one. We could put these offices down on the border and you get it all you're good to go. So I don't see any problem with having guest workers that are licensed to drive and that have insurance.
So you wouldn't give an undocumented person who had not participated or was not an applicant for this guest worker program a permit or a license, but you would make it a component of a larger plan to bring people out of the shadows, as they say, and to identify who they are.
I would tell those people, go enroll in our program. It's pretty fair and open.
Do you share the concern that so many candidates in this cycle have expressed that immigration is the largest problem that we face in this state?
If you call immigration and border, I think it is our number one problem at the moment because of the crisis that I think is still going on, although it's not in the news so much. But I think, again, we need to claim our lost sovereignty and make these decisions ourselves. We got into this mess because, once again, we let Washington say that he's going to make these decisions, and then they either do it or don't do it or botch it, and we need to do it.
Whose responsibility is the immigration situation in this state? Is it the federal government not doing its job, or is it the state's responsibility?
It's the state's problem for letting the federal government say, this is our call, we will make this decision, and then abiding by the non-decision that they make. So we just need to forget about Washington. It's broken. It's not going to fix anything.
You also talk on your website about the idea that we need to put, I don't know that you refer to them as troops per se,
No, I don't.
but either the National Guard or some kind of state guard on the border. So the idea that the governor has articulated and executed upon, that we're going to put guard members on the border to shore up our border with Mexico, you support that?
No, I don't. I call that Operation Photo Op. He's sending National Guard troops, who I was a state guard, because it's under the total control of the governor. But he's sending them down there, and his Adjutant General, John Nichols, has testified that the rules for engagement are don't engage. They have no authority or instructions to do anything but observe and report. No, I would send the state guard, after we've done this welcome immigration program, then I say we have lessened the problems on the border. We have more clearly identified what those problems are and how to combat them. Because I call it a needle in a haystack approach. People coming across the border, there are some bad guys surrounded by a lot of innocent people who want to come here for innocent reasons. But you move that haystack of the people who want to come here and work and be productive, and people we want. You move them over, they come in openly, what's left? I call it the needles. Then you know how to do it. And the state guard would be down there, and you could have other Texas assets, the DPS, the Rangers, go down there to help local law enforcement to enforce Texas state law against trespass and other crimes. And that's what they would be doing.
So I heard you complain that the National Guard is not engaging. You would expect the state guard to engage.
Yes.
So So we're going to have kind of an altercation environment down there? We're going to get a little physical with these people?
Every time you enforce laws, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
But not enforcing them is a probability that you're going to have problems. So that's what I say. My first order of business after I take the oath of office would be to appoint an adjutant general. And by that time, I would have told him, have a plan on my desk. So in 30 days, what is this mission going to be? What do you need?
Right.
What funding, instructions, equipment? What do you need?
Does it concern
and
you?
Who do you need to work with you? Because we're working with local law enforcement.
Does it concern you, Ms. Glass, that many of the elected officials and other leaders on the border and the border communities say that they're actually not in support of sending additional troops, whether it's State Guard or National Guard down there?
I don't think many of them say that. I've talked
They
to
don't?
them.
Sure they do.
No.
Of course they do.
Well, they don't want them if they're not there to work and help them. They don't want them as a hindrance. They don't want them there just to be a part of a photo op situation.
So you think if
So
they
I
were
think-
actually down there
yeah.
working, that it would be a different story?
Yes, working with them. We're partners.
There were a couple of ethics questions asked of the candidates, extended conversations. Of Senator Davis, there were a series of questions about the intersection of private business and public office. In the case of General Abbott, there was a long conversation about the Texas Enterprise Fund. So let me ask you broadly about those two topics, if I can. On the question of the intersection of public office and private business, how could you assure people of Texas, the people of Texas, that as governor, you would only work for them and would not in any way personally benefit from decisions that you made or from work that you supervised in the office of governor?
Well, I'm not a crony. I'm not a crony from the red team or the blue team. And the Libertarian Party is not a party of cronies. We're not corrupt like the other two. That's why I say one of our biggest problems is that the two-party system is corrupted by these special interests. And I'm not often, you may remember H.L. Mencken called an election an advanced auction of stolen goods. Well, I'm not going to steal
Is the
anybody's
problem
goods
that people
auction
give
off.
money to candidates and that those candidates then feel obligated to do things for those people?
The feel obligated part, that's the problem. I would take money from almost anyone, provided there's no strings attached. And they should know that you're not going to get anything other than good government from me and freedom, and I'm going to appoint people who are fit for that office, take the water board or other things that the governor makes appointments.
Would you
to.
pledge not to appoint contributors to any high offices of the state of Texas?
Oh, I think I can make that pledge.
So nobody who's given you any money? And I know you haven't raised very much money, so it's not a very high bar to get over. But
Okay, but
right.
you set the bar, and I said,
yeah,
okay.
but so you would not appoint any contributors to office in Texas. And how would you ensure that you personally or anything that you're connected to financially would not benefit from anything that you did in office?
Well, we make these disclosures. I don't have a business. My law firm is sort of on the dormant right now.
Yeah.
I don't have a business. I don't have investments. I don't have partners.
Do you feel like a level of disclosure asked of public officials these days is adequate? Because that's a controversy of sorts. We think that maybe we're not asking people in public office to adequately disclose.
I think it is. I think everybody knows everything there is to know about me because of that disclosure form.
Right.
I don't know anything else.
You're satisfied with that?
I'm satisfied
Let me ask you about the Enterprise Fund.
Oh,
So
yes, thank you.
the Enterprise Fund has obviously been in the news of late because we've discovered through a state audit that there were a number of companies that sought and received funds from the Enterprise Fund, had not filed applications or had not made the sorts of promises about a creation of jobs, or there was not the follow-up on that after that money had been provided to make certain that those promises had been kept. There's a controversy that relates to the current governor's administration of this because it all breadcrumbs back upstairs. But then there's also a controversy related to General Abbott's office as to whether he did an adequate job of, in his role, of ensuring that everything went as it was supposed to go. So where do you come down on this?
This is cronyism. This is corrupt. That fund should never have existed. If the people want to come and do business in Texas, they know how to find us.
Right.
Oh, and we're welcoming anybody who wants to come. They
Right.
shouldn't have to be paid to come and do this.
Cronyism is a buzzword, but corrupt suggests something illegal. Can you back that up by telling me specifically what you think is corrupt?
What I think is corrupt, and it may not be illegal, but it should be, is when General Abbott was asked for an opinion from the Attorney General as to getting the names of the people that this fund went to. He said that was confidential. This is what I understand. That's what I got from the debate. He said it was confidential. Well, that's wrong. It should not be confidential. But the thing is that there was nothing to disclose. There was nothing to produce because these people had not made applications. And I think that is corrupt. That they got money without even asking for it or not asking for it in any formal or written way. Just asking for it by word of mouth or a telephone conversation. Or some people say that they didn't even ask at all, they just got it.
Right.
And then those people match up to contributors to General Abbott's campaign. Yes, I call that corrupt.
Do you feel, and I guess he received some amount of money from people who had received enterprise funds, but of course, when you've raised as much money from as General Abbott has, you probably received money from everybody. So it's not really, I mean, do you necessarily see cause and effect there? Can you assert, do you believe there's some cause and effect that he received campaign contributions because money was given from the enterprise fund, or does it just look bad?
Well, I think it looks bad. I do think there was a cause and effect here, but it doesn't have to be a quid pro quo for this cronyism thing to work. They just know that this is a person they can do business with, so they want him in office. They know that he will cut corners and make sure they get what they need, whether it's developers who need water, he'll make sure they get water from aquifers hundreds of miles away. So this is the corruption that's going on.
So you tell me that if you're elected governor and on the very first day you're sworn in, you will eliminate all incentive funds, the enterprise fund, the emerging technology fund, any of these funds designed to attract business where people make application in exchange for promises? They're gone under Governor Glass?
To the extent that the governor can do that unilaterally, which I'm not sure they can.
Because?
I'm not sure. But
You think you need the legislature to sign on to that?
If the legislature created it, then yes.
Yeah.
But if it's something the governor just put in place, I would undo it.
So it's end it, not mend it.
Yes, end it.
End it, not.
Let the free market make these decisions. See, capitalism is getting a bad rap out of this stuff. People look at that and they say that's corrupt. The free market doesn't work.
But
this is not.
But Ms. Glass, this is an idealistic view in the sense that you would have to have mutual disarmament among the 50 states. You're putting Texas theoretically at a competitive disadvantage. Think about the film business. Texas went dark or threatened to go dark for a while on incentives to Hollywood studios coming to the state to film. Huge economic benefits, it is said, when those companies come. Louisiana and New Mexico took that as an opportunity to pass incentive programs and attracted a lot of film business away from the state of Texas that went into those two neighboring states. We lost the business because we didn't have incentives. Don't you think if you stand on ceremony and say, we're going to get rid of all incentives for business, that other states are going to be only too happy to benefit from that decision?
No,
and we're going to lose business?
No, I have confidence in Texas and the people of Texas that we can compete with anybody. Maybe
without offering any kind of incentives?
Yes. And, you know, frankly, if businesses are coming here just for the incentives, I'm not really sure I would want them. But, you know, it's a free country for now, and they can come if they want. But we may not have every industry come to Texas, but we'll have enough, and they'll be coming for the right reason.
The current governor has been traveling around the last couple of years very boastfully pickpocketing businesses from other states. He goes around and he says, you know, we have a better tax policy, we have tort reform, we have predictable regulation. California, Michigan, New York, we want your businesses to come to Texas. Is that something that you would engage in as governor?
No.
You would not recruit businesses from other states?
No. I think they know where Texas is and they know what we're about, and if they're the kind of businesses we want here, they'll come because it's a wonderful place. I pity the other states that have to compete with us.
But you would not be an active advocate for businesses moving to Texas?
I would just tell them, look, we got this freedom. If you don't know about us, then I'll educate you.
You're going to have a lot of time on your hands as governor, Ms. Glass.
Oh, I don't know.
All the things are taken off the table. Okay.
There are other things that need to be done.
Let me come back to this
like
question
water.
of public education funding, because there was a question to the candidates the other night in the debate. A gentleman from television, that's how I refer to him, I don't really know his name, who was not Gromer and was not Peggy Fecack, claimed that we are 46th in per student spending among the 50 states in Texas. Somehow that struck me as not right. That'll be fact-checked by somebody. We'll find out if it is. I don't know that we're 46th or not, but we're near the bottom. I think he said we were closer to $9,000 per student, and that was a couple $1,000s, maybe $2,000 below the national average. He asked them, and I'll ask you, what is the price tag for making education in this state better? And if it requires more money, where will we find it? Now, you've indicated to me already that you think actually we could spend less. Okay. You would cut public education?
Oh, yes.
Would you have security forces protecting you at all times from the parents to whom you would say, this blasphemous thing? You really believe we should cut public education
Yes.
funding?
You can overspend on everything, and we do, and education's no exception to that rule. I mean, we made spendthrifts out of the people that spend their tax dollars. It's like they can't spend it foolishly enough. If you give them more of a budget, and this $8,000 or $9,000 per capita, I think that's enough to satisfy our constitutional mandate. Lots of parents would love to have $8,000 or $9,000 to educate their children.
So the cuts in the 2011 session, you're cool with that?
Oh, they weren't enough.
They weren't enough. You would have cut
No.
more.
Oh, yes.
You are an original, I will say that. That is not a very popular point of view.
Well, I beg to differ. I'm going around.
You think it
talking
is a
about-
popular point of view? You
Well-
think there's enough people out there who believe that the cuts in 2011 were not adequate to the task that you can get elected?
Well, we'll see about that. But it is a view that is gaining currency.
You think
I'll say
so?
that we overspend on education. Where does it stop? I mean, this
Right.
judge has said we have to spend until more and more and more until our test scores get up to
Right.
his satisfaction. Look at the perverse incentives there. School districts now know that they can get more money, more and more money, by having worse and worse scores.
So you think that there are...
Only in the free market, that wouldn't happen.
Do you
You
think these
fail,
schools are
you
throwing,
get-
are they throwing the fight in order to get more money? They're actually deliberately lowering their test scores in order to get more money?
I think some are.
Would you like to name any names specifically?
No.
But you really believe there are school districts that are deliberately...
Incentives matter. Human beings respond to incentives. And if you did this in business, you say, if you fail, you'll get more money. Your budget will be better. People would do that.
So I've been on your website, and all over your website, you love on the Constitution.
I do.
So Judge Dietz, the Austin judge who has said so far that the state is out of compliance with its constitutional obligations on public school funding, he is citing that same Constitution as the basis for his ruling.
Well, Andrew Jackson said he made his ruling. He can enforce it. If I were governor, we'd say, well, that's interesting. We don't agree.
So you
And
would- so-
no judge and no panel of judges, no Supreme Court, federal or state, can tell Texas how to spend their Texas tax dollars or how to educate Texas
So
children.
if this ruling the ruling comes from Judge Dietz, it's appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court upholds Judge Dietz.
Which they will.
Governor Glass, well, we don't know if they will or
Oh,
not.
they will.
Governor Glass's response would be, talk to the hand, right? That's basically what you would say. You would not adhere to the ruling of the Supreme Court.
One aspect, the one that said property taxes are unconstitutional, school property taxes, I would say, okay, they're unconstitutional, let's stop collecting them.
And you would have enough money to pay for services in the state of Texas? You stop collecting taxes, how are you going to pay for
School
basic
property
services?
$8,000, $9,000. And I have said that we should remove all barriers for the local entities to institute, say, a penny sales tax. If they want to supplement what they get from the state, they should be allowed to do that, but not with property taxes.
So you support the decision of the San Antonio citizens on the ballot in 2012 or 2013 to increase their sales tax by 1/8 of a penny to fund full-day pre-K for 22,000 four-year-olds. That was a local control decision. They voted up or down on that. You support that.
I wouldn't add that to property taxes.
But it was a sales tax. It was a sales tax increase.
To replace property taxes. Property taxes are the worst.
So you
form
wouldn't
of
have voted
taxation.
for it if it did not correspondingly lower property taxes.
No, I wouldn't.
But what about what part of local control do you not like? Because that's local. If the local community decides it wants to do what it wants to do, isn't that entirely
Well,
consistent with what you
property
said
tax
earlier?
is not really local, it's in our Constitution, so we would have to fix that. But that's a job worth taking on. Property taxes are ruining us.
You said something about Texas not being obligated to listen to court rulings,
I
not
would
being
listen.
obligated to listen to the federal government. The word nullification, which is a bit of a poker tell, is all over your website as well. You don't believe that the state is obligated to follow dictates or mandates from the federal government. We should just basically refuse to do anything that we don't like that the federal government attempts to force on us.
States are obligated to oppose unconstitutional acts.
But what if
Not
it's
just
found-
do it because we want to, but
What if
it's
it's
our
found to be
obligation.
constitutional? For instance,
By whom?
the next question in the debate was about the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare.
It's unconstitutional.
But the Supreme Court has not found it to be unconstitutional.
They're wrong.
Is there anybody you do listen to?
You,
I mean, Ms. Glass, I'm trying to take this seriously and trying to take you seriously. So you're saying you wouldn't listen to the state court if the state court or the state Supreme Court found that the school finance ruling was what it was. The fact that the John Roberts-led Supreme Court has said, as much as you and a lot of other people may not like it, that the Affordable Care Act is constitutional, your attitude is basically, I don't care?
I care. I care about our Constitution. I care about our founders. I care about our country. I care about our liberty. And I know that the approach of just bowing to the federal government and accepting whatever dictate they give to us has ruined us. It is going to.
So why not secede?
Because I want to enforce the Constitution, not walk away from
But
it.
But whose Constitution do you want to enforce? I mean, I am really serious about this, because if you're saying we will enforce the Constitution and the Supreme Court rules a law that you may not like, and again, others may not like, to be constitutional on whatever perverse grounds they may have done so, your attitude is, if I don't agree with it, I'm simply going to ignore it.
Well, I took an oath to defend the Constitution. And it didn't say, as interpreted by 5 of 9 people in black robes in Washington, D.C. I have an obligation, everybody who took that oath has an obligation to the best of their ability understand what the Constitution says, to be able to identify when it's being violated and to step in and do something about it. I'm going to keep that oath.
Let me push you on this for a second before we talk about the Affordable Care Act specifically. So let's say on the first day of Governor Glass's first term, the 9 members of the current Supreme Court resign. And you appoint 9 replacements. So they're your members of the Supreme Court. You've appointed them. And those 9 Supreme Court justices rule, your appointees, rule in a way that you similarly believe does not uphold the Constitution as you view it. You would not follow the ruling of your own appointed Supreme Court if you felt that it somehow did not square with your sense of what was right for the state of Texas?
If they were people I appointed, I would look at their decision and read it and weigh it very carefully. But if I thought they were wrong and I was right, I'm going to be guided by my own conscience, as everyone should be. And nowhere in our Texas Constitution or in the federal Constitution does it say that the judiciary is the final arbiter of what the Constitution says. They're entitled to opine upon it. In fact, it's their job to opine upon it. Right. But it's an opinion.
Can I ask you a serious question? Are you running for governor or to be queen? Because this sounds more like a monarchical view of government than a democratic view of government.
I'm sorry it sounds that way. It only sounds that way because we've not followed these practices for so long that it does seem, it can seem extreme. But no, it's not just me. It's not my opinion. It's the opinion of lots of people who have looked into this. And it's the way our system was structured to work. And it won't work any other way. I'm not going to abandon my decision-making authority to anyone, and nobody else should either.
Let me run quickly through the rest of these questions. We're kind of short on time. Fortunately, we're also short on audience, and so the idea that we need a big period of time for audience questions, not a big issue. Because I want to be sure we hit everything else that you, this is not exactly a game show speed round, but I'll try not to follow up, okay? So on the Affordable Care Act, we have 5.5 billion or more uninsured Texans according to the last census estimates, first among the states in both the raw number of citizens and the percentage of our citizens. As the question was posed to the candidates the other night, we're leaving something like $100 billion on the table by not accepting back our tax dollars as sent to Washington in the form of the Affordable Care Act. Would that be your decision as well, not to buy into any aspect of Obamacare? And what would your solution be to solving the health care problem as an alternative?
Absolutely. I would not take those federal dollars with those strings attached. Yes, they took the money from Texas taxpayers and they want to give back a portion of it to us with serious strings attached. It's not worth it. We can't take the money. It's just not.
So how do you solve this chronic problem of the uninsured in Texas?
Well, one thing we should do is to say, Obamacare, we're not letting it be enforced here in Texas. We should tell doctors who are retiring because they don't want to practice under these circumstances. So come to Texas. We're nullifying Obamacare. You can practice the way you want to here. We'll free you up. And we can make this a haven, a beacon for people who want free market health care. And I think that'll do it. Now, another thing I've said is we should opt out of Medicaid, not Medicare, Medicaid. That's over 25% of our budget, and it's bankrupting us.
So how do you treat the people or make available treatment to the people who are currently beneficiaries of Medicaid?
Here's how. We take that considerable savings and we use a portion of it, I don't know how much, to craft our own Made for Texas services program. And I'm convinced we will have better services at lower cost. when we make those decisions here in Texas, not dictated to us by Washington bureaucrats.
Are you supportive of the Proposition 1 on the ballot this November to take
no.
money out of the rainy day fund to fund a portion of our transportation need?
I'm not.
You're a no vote on that?
I'm a no,
Yeah.
a big no.
Why?
Because it's cronyism. It's same as Proposition 6. They're doing
You voted no on the water
Oh,
proposition as well.
I coined the term Nix Prop 6. You create the slush fund, a three-man board that basically controls Texas groundwater, and it's for the cronies. It's so people who developed in places that nature and the free market said, don't build there, there's no water. They did it with complete assurance that would have no problems, because with their connection, they'll get your water.
So what are
And
you
the
going to
same
do
thing
to
in
fix the, what are you going to do to fix the problem of not enough roads and the ones we have are inadequate?
I've traveled over most of 254 counties in Texas,
Yeah.
and we have good roads with two exceptions. In the oil drilling areas, we have overused and damaged roads, and in the wind turbine areas. And in the urban areas, we have congestion. We should not divert, you know, when Rick Perry first took office, it was pay-as-you-go, and we had no road debt, but the cronies couldn't make money off of that. So that's why we had these big projects, toll roads and other things, because that's how they can make money. And they build these things like 130 is going bankrupt. Well, they knew that when they started it. So why did they do these, make these senseless decisions? Because they're cronies, they got connections. They know they will come out smelling like a rose because they will get the money.
So you would take toll roads off the table in a Glass
Absolutely.
administration,
Absolutely.
no toll roads?
No toll roads.
So how are you going to, I mean, again, I don't like to do math particularly, but I'm going to force the conversation to doing math here. You don't want to have more state funds for transportation. You don't want this deal out of the rainy day fund. You don't want toll roads. How are you going to pay for basic maintenance, let alone the new roads demanded by population growth?
Gas taxes is being diverted to other things not related to transportation at all, and other things
So
in
end
transportation.
diversions.
End diversion. And no, the Texas gas tax money should go for roads and bridges, not for bike paths or buses or trains or trolleys, roads. And I think
Or education.
or education.
Right. So
But-
when you remove the pig from this part of the snake, it pops up in this part of the snake. So one of the problems with saying we're going to solve the budget crisis by ending diversions is that you're redirecting money away from something to something. So now the something over here gets it, but the something over here lacks it. So for instance, when the governor talked about the money that was going to DPS going to what it was properly intended for out of the, I think it was trauma care. The fact is, you're not going to defund DPS, you're simply going to write the direction of the money as it was intended, but then you're going to have to somehow fill the hole you've created over here.
Well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But
Assuming
things
you
that are
can pay for a
dedicated
bridge.
Should go. They should go for what they're dedicated for. And you know, in urban congestion areas, we have not used common sense. In fact, we've done just the opposite in trying to solve congestion problems. On the Maynard Highway, 290, I've seen it personally. The lights are not synchronized. I think this is on purpose, to create traffic jams so that they could come in and say, oh, here's a problem we have to fix with lots of expensive projects and lots of money. Do the simple things first, and then let's see if we have a problem.
Local control on traffic lights, that's big news, right? That's what we should do.
But it's just a common sense thing. Before you institute a massive state-funded project, look and see what is the cause of the problem.
Are homeowner insurance rates too high?
Probably.
You seem not entirely sure.
I'm not entirely sure.
So are you any more sure about what changes might be made to the homeowners insurance rates?
No, I don't know.
Okay, that's a refreshing answer. If a 10-year-old girl came to you and said, can my two dads get married, what would you say? This was asked of the candidates the other night.
I don't think I'd engage in a conversation with a 10-year-old about marriage and the state. But I would tell anyone.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Why not?
Because I think it's inappropriate. If that's not my child, I would tell anyone, though, and a 10-year-old can listen, that I want to get government out of marriage.
But if it's not your job, then you're saying that people should be free to marry whoever they want.
I want to get government out of marriage.
So then are you supportive of legal gay marriage?
No, because that would keep government in marriage.
No, government
Yeah.
gets in marriage when government bans things, not when government
No.
allows things.
My approach is different. I want to get government out of it. And if, no matter what your definition of marriage is, I think you ought to want that too. Because intervention of government in marriage or lots of other things doesn't solve any
How is
problems.
government getting out of the business of banning gay marriage, government getting into marriage? I mean, this seems like backwards logic to me.
Well, not to me. If government did not issue marriage licenses, then people could enter into whatever.
Oh, so that's what we're talking
Yes.
about. So you think government should get out of the business of licensing marriages?
Yes.
So that would allow anybody who wanted to marry same sex, opposite sex, it wouldn't make a
Enter
difference.
into whatever voluntary arrangement you want and call it what you want, but government doesn't have to bless it. Because when government does, it picks and chooses.
But aren't there
which-
implications for tax purposes to be married? You know, if you're married versus single, doesn't that
Well,
have an
let's get
impact
rid
on
of
the
those.
tax?
Let's get rid of those. Any advantages based on your marital status. Income tax, I know that's there. I don't know that there are any in the state.
So if you came in as governor, right now there is on the books a prohibition against same-sex marriage. So as governor, your position with regard to that prohibition and the attempts to undo the prohibition would be what?
I don't think we're ever going to get that constitutional amendment reversed. But if you
It's going through the courts right now. The courts are actually seeming to be open to the idea of getting rid of the prohibition.
I want to get government out of marriage, and I think that's a better option. That's what I'm focused on.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. And if you stop issuing marriage licenses, instead you could have a registry with a county clerk. Like who we register our deeds and wills and things like that.
Right.
You could register your agreement. I don't know what you would call it. I don't think that matters so much. But your domestic partnership.
Yeah.
You can just put it on the registry. And that way it's there accessible 24 hours a day. Someone goes to the hospital needs to know who can make decisions for this person. You can look it up.
So what about abortion? Abortion was the next question asked of the candidates. Do you similarly believe that government should get out of the business of determining whether and when someone should get an abortion?
I'm pro-life, and I think that is a violation of the child's.
But you're an
and
advocate.
that is a proper function of government.
But you're an advocate for liberty.
Yes.
Is it inconsistent to be on the one hand an advocate for liberty, but say we're only going to allow liberty up to the point that a woman wants to determine whether she can terminate a pregnancy?
No, it's not inconsistent.
Explain, please.
Because that's a human life. If you believe that's a human life, then aggressing against them is an act of violence. And that is one thing that government is instituted for, to address acts of violence by one individual against another.
So you supported HB 2 during the last
Yes, I
legislative
did.
session. Would you, as governor, want to see the legislature put further restrictions on abortion beyond what was put in last time?
No,
You think 20 weeks is an adequate time frame?
I'm good with that.
Are you okay with the ambulatory surgical center's requirement of clinics?
I am.
And
I
the
think
admitting
that-
privileges requirement?
I am.
But beyond that, you think we can just leave the issue alone?
It's not a top priority. I wouldn't prioritize.
It is not a top priority.
It's not a
Okay,
top
very well.
priority.
And then last, I want to ask you about in-state tuition. This was asked of the candidates at the end of the debate last time. Currently, there's a law in the books that grants in-state tuition to the children of undocumented persons. You've got to fulfill certain requirements to be able to access that opportunity. It's a controversial issue. It's come up in the presidential campaign of Rick Perry, where he was booed at a debate for defending in-state tuition. We now have a divide among some of the statewides. The current governor, Rick Perry, the incoming land commissioner, presumptive, George P. Bush, both believe we should leave in-state tuition alone. Dan Patrick believes it should be eliminated. Greg Abbott asked the other night, said that if the bill came to his desk overturning in-state tuition, he would not veto it. So where do you come down on this?
I would not veto it.
You would not veto it. So if the legislature came to you with a bill saying we're going to get rid of in-state tuition as an option, you would not veto it.
I would not veto it.
Would you be advocating out in the world for an overturning of in-state tuition, or would you be more passively accepting the will of the legislature?
I would accept the will.
You don't think this is a big issue?
It's not a big priority to me. I've got lots of other things to do.
Okay. Let's stop there and let's bring questions in from the audience. Agnes has a microphone and she'll be happy to walk around if anybody has one. Any questions at all? I think our debate was more efficient than the other one.
I do too.
Questions at all for our audience? Okay, then Ms. Glass's gift back to you and ours is going to be a little bit more of your morning. So thank you very much for coming. Let's give Kathie Glass a hand. Appreciate your being here. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.